saying Tashidle, everybody, and hope you're all well.
New Year and Christmas can tell you.
Maybe getting very busy for Christmas and New Year.
That's so much. Yeah. Sanjay, Sanjan Robara Sho Tayan Tan Gate Para Bode So Han Tayan Tan Para Sum Tayan Tan Satan Namjun Simja Tamjaka to Totalana Machima Sanjay Kumar and Boja Chimia Tomacha. And D. Chedo and Bajanjus and Balajana and the Trisha and Napa Lanku, Lawale, Shingo, Shimbale, Tubale, Tojisho Manoa to go to Gazubana, Tikato Logical shooting in Kumasha.
So we set our motivation as usual to attain the peerless state of enlightenment by perfecting all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfectly train in those perfections, we must of course have a very good understanding of them. And to gain that understanding, we must be able to rely on a proper education of them. And so it is with this in mind that we are here to hear a teaching from the mind training series of texts this morning.
That the Namju Nation Channel, Kasuda, Rangi, Dunkin Nankala, and war and the Tinja Lama, Navajeres, and Chato Gentle, and Sheta Yonsu, so much water that didn't set up.
And again, as normal, we set up in the space in front of us, in the front of us, our own root guru in the aspect of the 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed Chen Rezi.
Rangi Tago, Rangi Tinjingum, and Jakaso the Rana Tinja Majin, the Simja Town, Masawa Meva, US of subject or the ship.
And surrounding us are all kind mother sentient beings without exception.
And the net, the Gaso, and the Lama Jeresila, Jeresi Kule, Jiwo or Jamba, Tuga horse, Eagle soon just set up, and around the Tago the Mayas in the town, and Jiwo Jamba Tuga horse. What did you set up a check with the check?
And the figure of Chen Rezig is marked at the crown by an Om, at the heart by an A, and at the throat by an A, and at the heart by a Hum. And likewise, all ourselves and all kind of sentient beings all around us are similarly marked at the crown, at the throat, and at the heart by Om, A, Hum.
And then Lama Jeresig. And you want about Tuga Hole, we say part of member training, and the Shingram Jana never Ishiba, and Ishiba Chantane, Ishiba, all of the Java Chanta, and Ishiba, and Tabjisama Takaja, Lama Jeresi, Chato Chanto de la team, and only uncle, three Lama Jesu Nevale, and we want me to go much water to the chick. Yes, so sounds like
Again, referring to the hung at the heart of the central figure in the merit field, Chen Rezig, countless light rays emanate, going out into the pure realms and inviting all of the wisdom beings, as well as the empowering deities, to come back. And the wisdom beings dissolve into that figure, the central figure, and the empowering deities confer the nectar empowerment, some of which overflows at the crown, and thereby producing the figure of Amitabha.
What did you call my share? What did you that did to so Sanja Tamjig and Tani what is it?
And that really to contemplate on this figure now as being the embodiment of all the Buddhas of the three times.
What did the conversation? Ranga Tago to never Simja Tamjil, Simja Lamibe, and Ninja, lama cheres la mi be an deva ro ta le deva yi ji deva ngo de ga deva ta sim je tam je do me ju de jawa de chana chima jawa ju de jawa shu je an ro ta ga de deva de chana chima deva ju de ba shi do me de chima do me de chana chima jawa ju de jawa shu je do me me deva de mi de chima 대다 교체 대다 용어쇼 대다 달리 찍기스 그러 맞아 어느 what 되게 어느 그래서 일이 사단인데 저가 단절은 지금 내가 주지 내가 쇼 내가 달리 찍기 어느 대다 전도 받대 어느 거서 어느 남부제를 쓰게 진짜 넣었어 어디로 공부하지
And then we kind of look on all the figures around us with the mind of compassion, of course, with cognizant of their various sufferings. And like us, then ourselves, and looking at the figure of Chenrezig with that deep faith, which is characterized by the pure faith, a faith of conviction, and manifest faith. And so we again make our supplications to the figure of Chenrezig as our merit field, and thinking how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and free from the causes of suffering. May they be free. May I be the one to bring that about. And then pray, O Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so.
Well, what did I saw the towel and Lama Cheresig and Casoda Takusontel and to the Jumpan. And what I can judge because round the ragged was Sinjata Chibon, Machine, a tone or Tiba the Tibachi, the Kabatu, the Semeshik, Tomakaba, Patu Chujik, Tiba the Tiba Tani. And dedicate to a new what the commission.
And that as a result of our supplications, continuing with the rest of the four immeasurables as well, that light rays now emanate from the figure of Chenrezig, from the heart. This descending nectar light dissolves into ourselves and all other sentient beings to the crown, permeating our entire bodies, and really bringing this blessing as well as the purification elements to it. And that so that we ourselves can really fulfill the aspirations inherent in the four immeasurables, in developing our loving kindness and compassion and so on that we have initiated.
Oh, that's what the commercial, what the ship, and then the Lama Cheresla and Caso Takanja, Simja Tamja, don't touch about Lama Cheres double, and because of the Tumnu, Lama Cheres in Comba, and took it up, don't the nigger. Don't need taken that the name was don't need to you in what the name was at the and the command to real that you part of Chuja get and get the Tiba to the Chagi you do and then Yala to maintain the Java Tosa Chitan and because of that to get some of your right. And there's a Tosa Chitan get checked out that and Yala to maintain the Java what in the chap.
And so that we may emulate the figure of Chenrezig, Buddha Chenrezig, bringing to completion our purpose of really bringing all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment as well, and knowing how that we need to gain that sense of closeness to the ideals of Chenrezig and to also emulate those ideals. We need to enter into the practice of purification and the accumulation of positive merits. In other words, the practice of the seven limbs and in mandala practice as well, in order to really avail of all the full complement of conducive conditions for bringing our practice to its completion.
Oh, yeah, that Lama Cheres commission and the dog was that Hassan to some kind dog.
The 6Dec some juba. Share up, maybe. Harul Chin na.
Should have been one last. That did it. What did it? That can get you. Not to get a soda. Tata can get what is a lambrim shunki. Tom Chamber, Sanjay Soda, Taya, you're the Sanjay Soda, Taya, you're the inner, you just chick Sanjay, let and go a chick, and let and win the Sanjay sign about the drag and lumber, but so much go to it. 고은진에 다간제 때도 찍어라 되는 삼모다 유에 되겠지. 남미도 쇼제를 도. 간제 디즈드 다간제 가서도 남미고 다바 가서도 저 거신이 때문에 전에는 신지 때문에 또 막히고 된점이다. 아니 저기 치원 가서 다 그거 된저 니가와 아니 저 와다는 다 된저 그 뒤에 아니 저기 따바때만 매맞잖아. 지금하고 임바 아니 이거 레마도 이나 아니 녀소라잖아. 차단 그 동네 유다 와다는 저 아니 코아치다 제다 그 동네네 제 마사모타네 딱 이제 진짜는 아니 대달에 연중 계주에 아니 연중 들라께네 내가 중에 아니 저거도 람라바 좀 냠살라 수준다 생각도 쉐라글라와 냠살란다 치고 아니 어디에 손도 다 되대도 아니 거 네가 기부 좋은다 기부 드린다 투모에 람살라 차대고 와 아니 되네 제도 다 가져 되네 제도 다 가져 네 가서 어디에 제도 다 되네 제도 다 가져 기부 첨별 람을 뭐 냠살라와나 아니 되네 그래서 그래서 면주가 샘티게 손에 아니 자주가 샘게다 손 파데주가 냠내 지다도 손 아니 대자마자 다야 저기 뉴도 상계 고바 토발라 다 간제 파데 테바 온더 게데 담았음도 서버 거기 뉴도 상계 고바 토발라 다 간제 상하이게 랑거 상하라마 규데 시용구요데 아니 자규도 최규 되돌아 아니 천재게 내줘거든 냠슬라다 아니 라메게 랑게 리발라 아니 기린다 도린 거는 람게다만 냠슬라다 즉 대직 나로라 차자 즉 산제 소라 요도 공주가 사치부 쉬려도 사치부서 다고도 냠내 샤바 가르치고 있는 디다 제다 쉬울 게 좀 이거야 람르 기대 가서 나라도 심마소를 채 아니 되네 안다 되게 뭔가 되게 람르 빠빠디게 채도 다 가서 답자 기부 담아주게 저기 그저다 다 그저 나서봐도 제유도 라기 주자 탐다 전에 나서봐서 되게 뭔가 아니 렉처 듣고 되네 딱 그저 람는 거 똑같이 비를 개토가 채지 어디 개쳐버려도 어디 샤
So, in referring to the graduated path series of teachings, again, to really point out just how remarkable this initiative was and is, in that it is the summary, really, of all of the Buddha's teachings, which is in itself really quite remarkable, but also laid out in such a way that a rank beginner can enter into the Lam Rim teachings and that path and follow it all the way up to the state of enlightenment itself. And so it is kind of like a beautifully laid out, perfectly laid out, perfectly ordered and complete set of teachings, really, from how to rely properly on a spiritual teacher, the do's and don'ts and so on, and then looking into a precious human rebirth of our leisures and our endowments, and what great advantage we have in having this precious human rebirth, and how we should take the essence of it and so on, how difficult it is to find, and so on, how it is fragile. And that's then hammered home in the chapters on impermanence, and impermanence especially in the form of death, how death is definite, time of death is indefinite, and only our spiritual practice will be a benefit to us at that time of death. And all of this in the context of the kind of perception, and as well as the capacity of the smaller capacity being their kind of path, looking into the dangers of falling into the lower realms, and the fear then initiated by that, leading them to engage in spiritual practice, and how that then can avoid having to gain such a terrible result, and be able to take a precious human rebirth again, or a future rebirth as a celestial being in the desire realm. And then the teachings continue on to examine cyclic existence in a great deal more detail, looking into it from the very peak of cyclic existence down to the hell without respite, and pointing out that really it is all just in the nature of suffering, and thereby initiating that the cultivation of renunciation, vital realization, if one is to attain the goal of the medium capacity being who sees the shortcomings of just gaining a good rebirth and wants to get out of cyclic existence altogether and attain liberation. And so this then, it brings them to the three higher trainings of developing renunciation, looking into concentration, the meditation, and wisdom, of course, to try and carry them to the state of liberation itself. And then from there, again, the path broadens out even more so to encompass the motivation of the greater capacity being who sees how all mother sentient beings are in the same boat as him or herself, having, they having realized how cyclic existence really just doesn't work. It's a broken kind of system, and wanting to get all of those sentient beings free from that as well. And so this then concentrates on the development of the mind of enlightenment itself, knowing that that is the only way in which to attain enlightenment, which indeed is the only way to properly benefit all sentient beings. And this concentrates on the development of compassion, of course, great compassion, leading to that mind of enlightenment, and then put into practice with the cultivation of the six perfections. And so here, even at that point, it's pointing out how this is the path of the perfection vehicle, as it's known, which, according to the texts, we need to practice for the three countless great eons in order to achieve the results of that path, full and complete enlightenment. And it's for that being who kind of can't bear that sentient beings should have to wait so long for my enlightenment, that being then will enter into what is known as the quick path, or the secret path to enlightenment, the tantric vehicle. And they are looking into the four classes of tantra, the Kriya, the Charya Yoga, and the Anuttara Yoga Tantras, and so on. The different stages of practice associated with the tantras, of the generation stage and the completion stage, and so on. And it's kind of like this, all of this is included in that one text known as the Lam Rim, or the Graduated Path Teachings. And it was a tremendous foresight and inspiration from the great lamas who started to collate and to establish the Lam Rim, laying down these topics in such an order and in such detail at the outset, knowing that the purpose is here to facilitate realization. That's, after all, what is very necessary here, and so they really took upon themselves to initiate the summarization of the entire teachings of Buddha in this such quintessential way.
我的，大概是，但是呢，三这个说了太远吧，一个这个，大概这个，地拿落了，地拿落了，大概就没对吧，就没这个差的多，太远吧这个的，地拿了没对吧，没这个差。
And so this is all the teachings of the Buddha, that all of the essential components, without exception, of all those teachings are summarized in the Graduated Path series of teachings.
그래서 사제가 소라스에 뒤절을 패면 뒤절을 패야 돼. 내가 다 타도를 판단이 요구로 왔다. 내가 다 타도게 전 주변 채도 아니 다 손타바 임바여서 다 되게 그가 지나를 주된 거지. 내가 먼저 고마체 아니 되네 지가서데 아니 저 먼저 고마 아니 되네 야그 지금 태갈 탐색 캠에 고마게 로라 마숑 거죠. 내가 피해라 아니 탑에 고마 되네 로도 채워서 태가 탐색 캠에 고마를 파티답지 딱 로라 띵 타숨제네. 오다 디나를 뭐 두번 매트겠죠. 어떻게 찾지 어떻게
And so how they are a perfect summary of all these teachings as well, all the essential points are there included. And that also, from the different capacities as well as the different levels of benefit, whether it's temporary benefits or ultimate benefits, it is part of, and in keeping with the way the Buddha taught as well, that these different benefits are taught and can be achieved within the graduated path presentation. Namely, for example, the higher realm goal of the being of smaller capacity, and then when one gains more power of mind, more perspective, the goal of liberation from cyclic existence altogether, and then ultimately that goal, that motivation to see how essential it is to attain full and complete enlightenment as being the kind of like the ultimate goal. These are all included as one gains like more power of mind, more capacity to broaden one's perspective in conjunction with the graduated path presentation. So we had stopped at verse number 30, which reads, since the 5 perfections without wisdom cannot bring perfect enlightenment, along with method, cultivate the wisdom which does not perceive the 3 spheres as real. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
Someday and share up what I can pageant to get it. Pageant in Yamlen child, share up Hongro, share up Mena, and pageant in Yamle Chagu Yomari, pageant in Yamle Chagu Yomarwa, Chagu Yomari, then they invite us share up, and share up to go marry, Chanjuka, simply share up. Chit and what you caso de Roapena, Tomani Tobe share up there, caso de Yarang, Tomani Tobe share, Tony Tobe share the Yarangula, you are there, Yina. 거주 냠내 되거든 발적인 냠내 쓰기면 좋아. 나도 그래서 this 거에 쓰고도 발적인 냠내 써야 돼. 다들 장주 그 생겼으면 돈이 좀 싫어. 그래서 탑다 대신해서 탑 장주 쓴다 때문에 어느 거수 미면 것도 되시. 싫어 고마데 계속 라리스. 소고도 와다 탑 장주 그 생겼으면 어느 돈이 좀 싫어. 좋아?
So this verse is pointing out how the 6 perfections indeed are all predicated upon the 6th one, wisdom. In other words, that the practice of ethical the wisdom of perfection of ethical conduct, the perfection of generosity, the perfection of patience, the perfection of perfect enthusiastic effort, the perfection of concentration are all for the purpose of cultivating wisdom. This is so important. And it said, actually, even in the practice of those initial 5 perfections, if one is not doing so without including wisdom, then they are not, they cannot be counted as perfections or practices of the perfections of generosity, etc. And that likewise, they need to be conjoined with the practice of the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, as well. And so this verse is pointing out that the method and wisdom need to be combined in the context of cultivating the 6 perfections. And that here, even if we have the wisdom of emptiness and are practicing the 6 perfections, they cannot be perfections also without the inclusion of that motivation of the mind of enlightenment. So that's what it's pointing out here. Since the 5 perfections without wisdom, they cannot bring perfect enlightenment. It's saying with method then, and in the translation you have, it says skillful means, which isn't correct. It's the word is method. Method along with method, cultivate the wisdom. The wisdom here is really the wisdom as in the 6 perfections. So it's saying method and wisdom must be practiced in union when we engage in the practice of the 6 perfections.
파제 두고 레레 나라래 아니 두두 타와제는 파제 숨주 소주 자고요. 파제 레레 나래 두두두다 집에 주제 집에 땅가서 집에 주제 집에 가서 다 가자 저 소바다 안 가서 준주다 안 땡에서 셰럽스 파자 레디를 what 차이 아니 컬스 님이 봤을 때 빼는 지마다 볼지나 지마당에 가서 심지 탐제도 산제 고마 톰도기 톰도기 아니 준비했으면 자주가 심게 심게 토네 아니 지마당에체 아니 지마당사 유제 아니 지마당와 보소서 그가 컬스 되게 그가 아니 유대인도 믿어 도면 파타참 유대인도 좀 되자면 봐치 뭐다 컬스 님이 배고네 다해 어떤 저 어디 그게 계속 남내res
So this conjoining of method and wisdom in the practice of the six perfections also means that each of the practices of each of the six can be inclusive of all six perfections as well. In other words, there is the practice of, they say, the perfection of generosity, and then there's the generosity of ethical conduct, the generosity of patience, the generosity of perfect enthusiastic effort, the generosity of concentration, and the generosity of wisdom. And similarly so for ethical conduct and so on. And likewise, it's when the text here, when it talks about which does not conceive the three spheres as real. This refers to the fact that when we are practicing, we regard all aspects of that, all the details of that practice as being empty of objective existence and merely imputed by thought. In other words, the three spheres may refer to, in practice of giving, for example, the motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, along with the object of our to whom we are giving, and it can be inclusive of yourself as the agent giving as well, or even the substance that one is giving. And so all of this refers to the three spheres, and these are we do not conceive of the three spheres as real, meaning that we regard all these aspects as lacking any objective existence and being merely imputed by thought.
다 뭐와지도 다가로 뭐와지도 다 심지어 탐정도 산제 답소도 개와지도 중에 뭐와지도 심지어 탐정도 안 산제 교류 좋아쇼 산제 교류 좋아쇼 소와도 뉴안도 산제 공부도 위에겐 교류 좋아쇼 아니 뭐와지 군도에 뭐와지로 왔다 돈다에 뭐와들라 아니 내가 가서도 소소기 개와 주위에게 아니 개와 가리 주위에나 아니 개와 뭐사고 유 아니 산제 고마 아니 조긴 소소도 잡아가 유대는 맞고 또 판다 잡대서 아니 어디다 가서도 돈다에 뭐와차들로 와 어디다
And so similarly, in the context of any action inclusive of the six perfections, when we dedicate, the virtue of that action, again, we do so by, again, not conceiving of the three spheres as real. In other words, when we dedicate, of course, we dedicate for the benefit of all sentient beings that we may quickly attain the state of enlightenment. That is the conventional dedication. And then the ultimate dedication would sound like this, that the virtue that I have accumulated, that the purpose for which I have accumulated that to attain the state of enlightenment, and myself as the agent accumulating that virtue. Again, these lack any objective existence and they are merely imputed by thought. And this is regarded as the ultimate dedication.
지난달 달로 주는 것도 배제 관계 캔디인데 이래 야 얘기는 알로라 사바들 맞좀 보이는 뒤도스 제시를 쉬대 막 어떤데
And I'm sure that the older students among you are well aware of this, and that, but I'm just explaining in a little more detail for any new people who may not yet know about this.
다 란지 투바 란지 마다나 최배 수기 최면 제시베스 대질 준도 란지 투발라 따네 보마 제셀라레 있죠.
Verse number 31. If you don't examine your own errors, you may look like a practitioner, but not act like one. Therefore, always examining your own errors, rid yourself of them. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
파조의 야구이나 두자이나 나도를 개와 침부시다 그요 말 랑이 지단의 야구 좀 말해 봐이나 아니 오늘 내 우마디 뒤내고 와 이제 들어 것도 더 나서 내 봐지 아니 피 야구 민도 피 치치도 그냥 제시 뭐 보시죠 되게 또 소소 배 내주 뭐 하고 건체 소소 그 지단들 내주 한 먹고 그 차원도 한 먹고 그 차원도 아니 거기 가서도 아니 랑게 다 같이 가서도 랑기 추바 랑기 마시바 쳐 아니 당가서 저 주변에 랑기 쳐 주고 요 삼자질라 아니 오늘 전에데 다 가서데 미디어 좀 대기 내가 요거 인사 뒤수고요 봐 그때
And so this verse is pointing out a very moot kind of point for us, isn't it? That we are often so blind to our own shortcomings, and yet we see the shortcomings of others so clearly. And so here, there's a fault here in the degree of mindfulness and alertness, and that we are able to employ in the examination of our own minds and what's going on in our internal world. And yet, we are wonderful at seeing how everybody else is coming up short and explaining the faults of others, and having a great deal to say and knowing a great deal about the faults of others. But it's something that we need to address because even on the outside, as it says in the verse here, that we may look like the real thing, so, the virtuous practitioner. But in fact, because of this fault, that we are indeed not anything of the sort. And so it's imperative that we become aware of our own faults and become solely aware of our own faults and not to worry about the faults of others so much.
That is 계속 다니 전부 저거 뒤준데는 그 랑전전다 아니 단지 말이 번이게 그 아니 영어도 뒤준데 아니 공부하시는 쇼고 요가 인자 아니 그래서 쇼고 와서다 코나 쪽에 아니 저거 다에데 아니 샬라다고 말하라다고 요트 아니 전에서 대체 균도 랑게 투발라서 랑게 투바 다 저거 랑전지고 온거 요네 요거 요나다 아니 다가네 생게 제 가서도 그러다 코나 쪽에 랑전지 제바이나 안 균데 요거레스 아니 딜라데는 요모 기억고레스 아니 다지 마디바기 아니 지금 뭐도 주바이나 다 아니 견데 컨트롤 뭐도 주바는 아니 견데 요거레스 아니 거기서 뒤 털다 지금 도나 제대로 임바 인자 아니 견도 랑게에서 출발을 제바지는 되게 요바 인자 아니 그 무엇은 다네 아니 그 출발의 요거도나 아니 그 폰트 맞지 나고 요바자데 어떻게 나야 되는 계속 라레 됐어 안 계속 자주 쓰면 라레라 도나 지금 소다 진짜 실제고래 소고 여봐 어때
So likewise too, we should examine the lives and the attitudes of the great holy beings of the past, who are constantly, really outlining or outing themselves into the sense of, how prevalent the self-cherishing attitude, the self-grasping attitude is prevalent in our lives, and that we need to make a continuous efforts to see the faults that ensue from pandering to our self-cherishing and our self-grasping, and to kind of understand too that we have to own these faults ourselves, that we are the ones who are actually, as it were, infected by such self-cherishing and self-grasping. Therefore, the faults are ours, the faults that arise from them are ours. And to be able to see how, the pathway from this kind of like allowing our self-cherishing, self-grasping to take hold, and then the mistakes that ensue from that, the faults that arise from that, And they examine this, they analyze their own minds in that regard, to be able to recognize these pathways, to see the faults of where they are initiated, and therefore to act at that point to overcome them, apply the antidotes, and to get rid of them. And this is the modus operandi of the great beings, and they're saying we should try to emulate what they do.
Nyomu onje jesa shenda jesa nyeba lina tani nyamju besa tekwa chela shube kansa je kasi nyeba mima jesa lali yis.
Verse number 32. If through the influence of disturbing emotions you point out the faults of another bodhisattva, you yourself are diminished. So don't mention the faults of those who have entered the great vehicle. This is the practice of bodhisattva.
다 전주 선배 냠내 지금 속에 아니 개추슈데 다 간자 저 생기 내가 말린 거 잖아. 다 생기 경거 찾는 마다 연대가 찾는데 라라 경거 찾는데 아니 경도 용도 땅답지. 근데 셰라 다들 연대가 찾는데 어디를 저도 어다가 이제 경거 찾는 짠짠도 아니 강가 경 통되는 소리자 아니 소소가 너무 경고로 와. 너무 경고요도 아니 연대가 찾는 바데 아니 하도도 아니 말아도 내 당보하래. 청와 군대에 녀몽 시험도 줘라. 소소 가사치라 교 여바네 교시라 매가 통거래. 소소 마가사치라 교 충도 좀에네 교 전부 통거래. 그래서 말아도디 착당게 시험도 줘되는 지마 인자. 너 수보 내가 시다시다 요 말에 나도 내 당보하라. 칸에다 쉐거라. 너 수보 내가 딱고 이치고 쉐거데 랑게 가사치라 교시라 통거 말에. 근데 랑게 가사데 니마 좀 마가와 차소나 어디 교 전부 통거래. 그 랑게 가마가 정말에 좋대는 지. 또나 약고 제 어디 들으셔. 근데 또다 들으도 나라도 배 지금 정부 인사가 지금인데 정부들 좀 주셔야 돼.
So this verse is really pointing out how essential it is that we, as those who endeavor to practice the Mahayana vehicle, to practice the cultivation of bodhicitta, is that we need to see the good qualities in others and to see the faults in ourselves, and that it should not ever be the other way around. And that here it's so important that we are understanding that when we are critical of others, that it is like opening a door to mental affliction as well, and that we can easily be pandering to the habituation of what we are, the mental afflictions that we are habituated to, and that this is kind of prevalent too in the sense of, how we act differently towards those we like, who may have faults, but we don't see them because we like them. And then those that we dislike, even though they may not have faults, we see fault in them because we dislike them. And so we can see what at play there is simply the mental afflictions of attachment and aversion, isn't it? That we're speaking to our attachment when we see our friends, those we like, as somehow perfect. And then we are speaking through aversion when we see the faults in those we dislike just because we dislike them. And so this is something that we have to be very, very aware of. Very aware, for example, in a situation where we have good relationships with somebody, we do like them, and so we see them, we don't see the faults, their faults at all. But then the situation changes and something happens so that now we dislike them, and suddenly we see their faults as very huge and very obvious. And so we have to see that, even though we might think we're quite honest and open in our own opinions, but this gives the lie to that, doesn't it? That we are really kind of clouded in our judgments by mental afflictions, which comes from that habituation to criticize. So we have to be very careful in this regard.
So what is it? I need to know what to let about in the Chihuahua good in the and got the Tangwa Shadow to kill the chairman, the Stats, that way made the time, but after you told that the day you may be said that. 톱도 연대에서도 소소 가사데 야구도 쓰기로 와. 연대에서 그때 좀 샤워. 연대에서 문에도 펜베 수때가 있는 펜베 자주 보는데 가고 싶도 와. 가고 싶은 거라도 가서 된本来我做三届的讲句什么就结尾呢，或者捐给他怎么捐有吧，怎么的截图有嘛的，可是他们玩吧，他们玩印度，他就是对这个呢，他人家其中的下图的在这边都我考不多，考不远，他真的因为他刚才吹不说的，所以呢看你哪个，可是所以因为呢。甚至他们话几枚呢？他们话几呢？让了真的根本这个钱全部砸全部差的多啊！这这个绝完了，那个几枚呢？他砸全部差的是吧？是吧？砸全部差的是吧？但是咱们的这个也是当年全部基本上都羡慕我的，就砸全部这样。他真的应该，那个就让个捐角色的一个的，那当跟着什么的，我就先做个嘛的，先嘛做的，对了对了，那你把啥什么都。说这个偏早晚要团每个人，那捐个钱的嘛的，就原来钱的大的，我的真的，牛毛我给上，给谁现在，那牛毛我给上，给谁现在的，你把另外，但你给谁现在，他的给谁个讲究什么，是个嘛，他讲究什么睡眠好不嘛的吧，好不过就，你把另呢，但你娘就不说娘就的，但给他讲究什么，没法一的。甚至是砸起我那时候砸起不修的了，对了，捐捐钱，对了，那么捐钱呢，对了，那时候呢，他说是娘们的牛个多，但对了，一般是这个我上面修当过的多，但是开过去了，随便看啥的，你把明白就是哪里什么，做的到牛毛我给马个我真的另外的做起的，但是所以做起的牛毛我想法都觉得马个的另外去。
So what's being emphasized here, of course, in that first line, if through the influence of disturbing emotions, you point out the faults of another. So here it's talking about definitely under the influence of the mental afflictions, there's already a sense of dislike in your attitude and therefore in your judgment and criticism, and saying that this must be pointed out. This must be eradicated. We cannot tolerate this attitude. It's not beneficial. And Gav is pointing out too, for us as beginners, we tend to be sort of fickle, short-sighted, and too quick to assess another as well. That we're kind of like saying, "Oh, I like that person, therefore they're good," and so we kind of like then. Kind of into a sort of sense of denial as to the kind of shortcomings they may have, the faults that they may have. And likewise, with somebody we kind of take a dislike to, again, we're short-sighted and kind of find it very hard to see that they could have any good qualities. But this is sort of like showing our ordinary perception. It's incredibly limited, really, when you think about it. That one is that we don't know at what level the person we are criticizing is at, and that they may, as I say here in the verse, may be a bodhisattva, and that. So, if that is the case, the only one who's losing out there is ourselves, something that's a great loss to ourselves. No benefit will accrue from that, and so even if they're not a bodhisattva, that it is again only harmful. To be criticizing based on a mental affliction, and that it is only something that is going to harm our own practice. That's what it's saying here. And so we should be very, very careful with regard to being so quick to criticize. And again, it's completely out of keeping with the sort of motivation that we have anyway, the kind of commitment that we have made to see all sentient beings without exception as being incredibly precious, incredibly important and vital to my goal of attaining enlightenment.
我知道，当然，特别什么他呢？这我那呢，所说的这个现在这个可能给其他嘛，这个这多呢，你所说的通过多呢，你的特别什么他呢？第二，就大家的老百姓呢，可能碰到约定的，考虑相关的就业的那个买这个。 안 돼, 라마이나 콜라 팬도 요에 되겠지. 야나 코랑게 아니 지금 소소라 지금 가서다 되나 지금 계좌치는 아니 지금 지단 근데지는 약속에 근데 사쳐다 좀 가르 약속에 계좌치바이는 아니 지금라 아니 지금 코랑게 감다 좀 받잖아다 제시 잡도 받지지 제시 잡도 받지 다가자 코라 페페 삼로 타네 아니 코라 지다 만두 받지바이는 그 견주스게 말와 다디 지다디 딜레 안디 도디 야가무도 딜레 디 야가무 그 견주 견디 매바 소타 직 탑시 시대 견주 제와나 펜토에 그 말이 견디 매바 소타게 에네 탑시 안 디안 가서도 코랑게 되바다 팀에 토네 되바다 팀에 토네 제가 삼로 토네 펜베 삼로 토네 어떻게 거야 딘내줄로 가져봐 나한테 가서 너무 엉기 아니 견주 제도 또 펜베 삼로 요 말이 너무 엉기 제원데 아니 거슬라 이네 다 맞지 봐봐
Now, is there any possibility then, or any occasion or situation where we can offer correction or criticism? The answer is yes. But both the general and the detail of the situation has to be beneficial. And so here, if it is going to be beneficial, and here if one is able to point out what is incorrect in another's behavior or attitude, and then choosing the right time for it as well, and ensuring that from your side there is absolutely no mental affliction. One may offer advice. Now, this has to be not only adhere to those conditions, but also that it is acceptable to the other. That they are receptive to what you're about to say, and that you are doing so in a kind of an atmosphere of camaraderie rather than someone pointing out their problems. And so this is very, very important. And especially there's no anger involved. And the other situation is that if somebody happens to ask you a question, if they have seen a difficulty in themselves and they want some advice on that. And then, of course, in the course of your explanation, and you can point out, wouldn't it be better to think like this, or wouldn't it be better, do you think, to act like this? One can offer suggestions in that sense, and then according to that which is in harmony with what he or her wants in that situation, and that's very, very important. Again, to stress. That there can be no place for mental affliction in any of these interactions, and that and if there is mental affliction, then you can see that there's going to be no benefit, whoever the other person is, and so you can see that is only incorrect, and that will kind of like be owned by you as well. And so again, it shows great care, and then one must have only the motivation to benefit. And show no little skill and timing when one intervenes.
야, 삼점들의 고급들의 누가 야, 코란 돌아 야, 강에 저거 채채다. 야, 근데 그거 야, 답지해야 돼. 베르 차차 로카시아 콜라 있는 베릭라 다다디 페체 초가대 홍콩에서 김에도 페체 다 루바카를 샤조 루바지리샤. 이나 코란도 남바르면도 아니 코란도 부구지 아니 그 자판을 친전 아니 동안 로지시상아 데 랍다 데 롭좀 차 아니 참잠치 아니 데 동전 데드 보디 술레스와 데레 오스트레일리아 아니 파마 에스ම් 강에잖아 나 무엇인가 심바지가 다 거저 강에 시우 채차 아니 거저다 데도도 아니 코란도 라비 나게 다나 라비 있어 내가 피가 챙게 코란도 남바다 레문도 아니 게 도바르지트 아니 코란도 인체 강에 시우도 부배 롭좀 차차차 로니슈 장아체 당부탕자 아주 정도로야 아니 얘데 동바지스다 semde mache semde kayo mar semde yongre yene ya ta semde chana kranje subule ne ani ko shuj phen to ko dilema sema buche ani tene ta chi thapshi me te ba yinsa ta yakshu tawde ta chara zugone ta chi kaso de chi namju chi kaso de 소소 저기 농사무지나 땅을 농촌을 남게 메스 남주지양 지켜라 두자시야 고르잖아 뭐다 다 다리 된데 좋아해 자다 그 데디케이션 전단에 된데 지금에 사단에 참부라 매와이나 다 하자마자 다 무슨 가 참부제 되게 있어 어때게 에너지 제투나 근데 야구 요랬어 당 샘제 저마 기버자 샤핑 말스 안가 내가 거기 그 사과나 침바 바tum나 지도도 대 냐스미에 피다 쇼도 냐스미에 피싱 오 미신 피다고 치 아니 내가 통해서 와 아니 계속 냐도도 생기어서는 내가 전화다 니마 제레네 저도 냐초는 맞음 코랑 저랑 보고다 전화도 제가 치슈 보고도 매번 저 샘제 요래 카요 말에 얘네다 니마 제레네 것도 냐초는 생기 메스 아니 냐스미에 offshore the tongue the magic charge and rubbish pin of looks. And what chickens are some of the nigger tapship. Corrado can shoot check and tapship touch your but I need that don't go to the pamper to sometimes you're the pair tapship your mata. Or that the legend of the pendle your goodness. That is actually oh chicken can just give me a suck. And just made the option of Mate. charge 지금 어떻게 돼요? 좀 답시도 와. 그래서 강에 주체 되나? 양 좀 답시도.
Also, there may be sort of extraordinary and particular auspicious opportunities where one can be of great benefit in kind of pointing out things that are incorrect or untoward in others' attitudes, others' behaviors, and it just can't be that the opportunity is there to bring of great benefit. In other words, that you can offer the advice, and they are very receptive to that advice. And again, I was giving an example here that this happened some time ago. There was a couple in Berwick. The husband, I think, was from Hong Kong, and the wife was from some other Asian country, and that they had a son who had gone to Japan. He finished his studies. He was about 25 years old, and somehow died in Japan. And his body was returned to Australia. And they, of course, were naturally totally and utterly distraught. And then somebody who knew them invited Genna to come along. And so Genna came along at that point and offered some prayers, and then offered some advice to them to say that, to really try not to get overwhelmed by concern here, because on the one hand, that would harm your own health, and that and they have to accept that there's nothing you can do about the situation as it is now, that this incident has happened, and also beware of the relationship that you have. Don't take it out on each other using harsh words or anything like that, but use it as an opportunity to even become closer to each other. Really look out for each other and show that love that you have for each other. And so they were very receptive to what, again, I was saying. Then he spotted in the house that there was a very high-class fishing rod and fishing equipment. And he suggested to the husband, who was the fisherman, to perhaps to give up fishing for the sake of your son, for the benefit of your son's future life, and to give up that fishing completely, dedicate the merit towards his benefit. And the fisherman, the husband said, I'll do that. And again, I said, don't just take the fishing rod and your gear to an op shop, but actually break the fishing rod and put it in the bin completely, so that nobody else will take up the negativity. And that he said, yes, I'll do that. He was very receptive to the idea. And so it's in a situation like this that where they can see that there is some, because the love they had for their child now can transform into some sort of benefit by a change in their own behavior, a transformation in their own behavior, and that he was at that point, that opportunity, willing to take this change on.
Sometimes we can get Koran to Kangashi, and ninja the Google right, and that
So again, I'm saying yes, there are these times when people are kind of in the midst of some hard problem, difficulty, great difficulty in life, where they may have be a lot more receptive to this kind of advice. And so I can recommend that you take this kind of opportunities when they arise, to help people.
Everything okay,
But yeah, to try and do this every day, very difficult.
everything okay.
So again, I'm saying, not to rock up to everybody at all times, especially, for people who have no perceivable major problems. Very difficult to offer this kind of life-changing advice to them, and they to be receptive to it.
So, guess Janji Samba Karkarching to the Demotavi solution choice marwa. That's so the guess Dani Chambusuke, Choman and Lucky and Sigade, then guess Dani Chambusuke or no more only shall I guess shall I give you chicken? Teach ever, that Kochi Regime inside Konatang chicken something water, that the China what in your cheddar. And no more Kim I get that how could they get more? What did it all? What did
And so this verse, then the essence of this verse is to really say, it's very important for us to see how we integrate the advice here, that in the kind of our endeavors to emulate the practices of the Bodhisattva. It's not that we need to be aware of who is and who isn't, demonstrating the Bodhisattva credentials, and to again avoid criticizing them, but rather to turn it on ourselves and say, look, if I am posing or endeavoring to emulate the practices and the attitudes of a bodhisattva, then I need to be extremely careful about any criticism I make to anybody. It doesn't matter. So it's a very, very important that, and also to never even offer advice that is in any way connected with mental affliction. That is the key issue here as well. And that means that we have to become extremely, how would you say, very accurate in noticing when mental affliction arises or not. So that we are absolutely clear that what is going to come out of my mouth here is in no way connected or tainted by mental affliction.
Nieguru onye penzu zhejuxin, tuasangumbe jawa nyamjuge, zashe chimda jinda, chimnamla, chababoa gese la le yinche.
Verse number 33. Reward and respect can cause us to quarrel and make hearing, thinking, and meditation decline. For this reason, give up attachment to the households of friends, relations, and benefactors. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다게 메와 차소선 저거 미션바진 얘기 아니 제다레 로바지도 터치서 아니 마이키마 제네 아니 거저 좀 잡에 잡었는데 아니 진짜 책부자 많이 녜데는 그런 셔바지라 아니 로바지에 그 쇠바레 그 제바레 쓰서 다까지 지금 된대전에 다까지 저 파도 견주 제된 제대 아니 너무 있게는 다 규주 초라 쪽으로 나 너무 샤와도 쪽으로 다 전다도 这个가서다 这个说出个这个国校长、最高长、三业同业党、团结党，今天这个钱多大？今天这个钱多大？俺这个今天这个钱多大？个这觉得俺说出今天的团结的确实没团结了，俺的确实没给这个多少。俺托上公司钱，俺讲话俺这个多少，俺就变是。俺今天就把咱说出个咱这个咱些听到那差不多，他的俺边个说的，他对了，拆迁钱的。你要说了，我叫我养过来，拖的钱的去，俺说是缺的特别多的，当中呢，因为你们就没法查出来，什么鸡巴钱，我当没法查对了，我他搞的人家按着要吧，他给我按着，他这个都上不上去，我他妈就查要吧，啊，我这钱呢，俺过这个厂商的，什么这个钱呢？我的是。听到了，俺差不多我说就是拉links，我到现在个上了当呢，俺这个是的钱全部许多嘛这些的，你们就，但说实话，我这边的缺的特别多的，当中呢，俺缺的特别白去当，你们就是我这个没法查完呢，故乡没法查完呢，呀，可当没法查，就是来我的没法查了，我当这个都上这这个生活时间嘛周边去。那个娘们了嘛，那个特上过了嘛，那么接的，俺给谁拿来的说的。
So reward and respect cause us to quarrel and make hearing, thinking, and meditation decline. And so here it's a case of like, when we place too much importance on the sort of help that we get or respect that we receive from others. And so when that doesn't arise or when that disappears, that there we might have an overreaction to that and start using nasty words to kind of relate to those who have taken away their benefit or taken away their respect, such as a benefactor and so on. And so here, it's very, very important to understand how destructive and how pointless such behavior is. It's a waste of time as well as degenerating our study, our contemplation, and our meditation, and that what is has been offered to us has been in order to facilitate our practice of the Dharma. And so, therefore, if in taking it away, it kind of like really destroys that practice, then we haven't had the right attitude towards it in the first place. And so here it's very, very important to see how attachment, as it says here in the second half, for this reason, give up attachment to the households of friends, relations, and benefactors. And so that when what is being offered to you is being used for your practice, is being freely given by others and gracefully accepted by you for your practice, that is all wonderful, that is all beneficial. It's a win-win situation. But at one point, it will end. It's not when it will end. It will end, as in anything that is gathered will disintegrate and fall apart. And this is a natural law, and so this is something we should have factored in all the time when we are receiving from others, that it will come to an end, and so therefore it will not cause any disturbance or upset to the mind. This is so important that we remain even-minded, giving no opportunity for mental affliction to arise, and so we can see, reflect how, we don't place too much importance on all of this benefit that we are receiving, and that it is absolutely no problem. And so if that, the respect that I have been receiving and the help that I've been receiving comes to an end, then you say, that's fine, that's okay. I continue on as I am, and never allow yourself to become upset.
他本来那个这个说的，啥些的中国因为呢，我这个呢看多个因为呢， 다 가리 임바이네 디 가서 되게 개 전부 쉬우지 마지고 좀 되게 그 지단이 개 전부 쉬우지 마자 어다 야고 잡아이나 야고 잡아대 소리 쳐다 좀 다도라 다개 전부 쉬우지 니마지 디다 아니 당rinda 쳔마다 야나 딜라 때는 다 강에 태워도 때는 그 미소가 쉬우지 전부 줘도 그 가리 임바이네 소도 야고다 튕겨다 가리 임바이네 야그 세절 간자스네 그 다들 랑다 카테 줘임바 야나 시엔지 롱징 임바 그 도다리 저래도 도다지 와다 이게 그가 어때 다들 다 같이나 진짜 팀남라 잡아 보았다 같이 착세 보네 그 다들 딱 때만 내가 저래 아서 되게 가서다 왜 이거 내 주신 맞는데 어떤 거디 계속 나래 있어 딱 계속 다니 전부 속에 안에 딜라 때문에 안에 지금 예고다 된데 그 가서다 사실다 되게 소소 최초 되게 말했어 가서 되게 제대로 못 봤는데 안에 딜라 착바디 안에 뽕담 난거 여러 봤어 그래서
So this is the same, like, when any relations that we have, our relatives, our friends, so we hold close, our companions, etc. That relationship is important, but we shouldn't place too much importance on it. Because we know that at some stage some distance will come between us, and so whether it's from some problems that arise, or indeed for whatever reason, that it's just the way things are, that they may associate with other people, then or pass away, or for any kind of reasons we can see that some distance may appear between us and others. So we see all of that connection as important, but not to place too much importance on it, because then that allows attachment to creep into the relationship, and that is something that is completely we have to abandon according to this verse, especially in our efforts to assimilate the practices of the bodhisattva, and that we can see that the relationships that we have indeed with all others are that which ought to be facilitating our spiritual practice. That's the key point, that whatever is there is used to enhance our spiritual practice. And so if that goes, that should not disturb our spiritual practice. It must continue on. And saying that if attachment is involved in these relationships, then that will disturb your mind, and that will disturb your practice.
다 좀에 세계 신선 투조신 개외 세계 주수 냠조베 대시 신제 예도 묘베 측수 뭐 예스 측수 뭐 예스 라리스.
Verse number 34 says, harsh words disturb the minds of others and cause deterioration in a bodhisattva's conduct. Therefore, give up harsh words, which are unpleasant to others. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다 좀에 세계 신선 투조신서라 개외 세계 주수 냠조베 대시 신제 예도 묘베 측수 뭐 예스 라리 다 간자지 셰라 가서도 펜베 섬도 토네 아니 측이네 아니 가서도 다 간자 측주부 마셰 측주부 배주 마다예 아니 어떤 아니 돈다지 뭐네 아니 가사들 편바 바시 주메체도 어떤데 시험에도 안텔은 네베도 지금 측주 때도 방아데 계산라래 소트체
And so, in saying here how, from our point of view, from the bodhisattva's point of view, the objective is solely to be of benefit. And the words that we use, therefore, should be only words that will bring benefit to the other. We should never contemplate the use of harsh words and to say that this is not something that's going to bring about that benefit. And that this is not in keeping with either the spirit or the actions of a bodhisattva. And so, therefore, we should give up harsh words.
천소는 내비 천소는 아니 착소 녀모 당보 게마타 보좀 제바 제셀라리 있죠.
And verse number 35, habitual disturbing emotions are hard to stop through counteractions, armed with antidotes. The guards of mindfulness and mental alertness destroy disturbing emotions like attachment at once as soon as they arise. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다 녀모파 그저 현양 치바이나 아니 녀모파 공서나 아니 녀보게바이나 도가고 지르서 다 녀보 톱다 때마다 맞잖아 도투고 말아 톱다 때마다 게는 것도 레당보라 도 카보르와 근데 이바 인자 아니 녀모 공바이나 아니 도 와도 강에 채는데 아니 전세 기비에서 전바다 세신의 수는 녀비 최선순절다 녀모 계도 계모도 계오도나 당보 계오도의 지금 마디시시 용아 갑라 아니 차소 녀모 다 깨온 거요 맞대 뭐트네 다디 깨봐이나 아니 지금 라레네 셀레네 그래 근데 이마 인사 아니 녀모 깨와 지금 매스는 아니 제게 뭐 깨답지 못했어 그러 차소 녀모 당보 깨마타 보존 잡아다 당보네 콜 국가 맞대 맞잖아 국가 맞대 맞잖아 아니 제도보다 계속 나 pen 차저로 콜로 잡아되는 콜로 당보네 콜로 싸네 아니 저게 가서다 지금 다 지금 마치 다 숙청부 연애니 라제 니가 내 당번에 요거 말봐 미그 책 두자 셔봐 있네다 남주 두자 때봐 있네다 대대 지금 제제데 아니 랑게스 또 마디 시시 차도 지금 미대와지 용한테 아니 이 코디스 대 차네 아니 내가 좀자 먹고 살다는 가르치는 거 알라고 요래 그 살찌기 남자 지금 다 차를 먹고 랍서서 다 좀자 먹고 거네 다 미셔마 매바이는 어서 미모보기라 랍서다 좀세 먹고 거네 아니 코로도 숙체도 체도 소도 아니 딜라베 깔아서 식사 말에 건남주도 빼 두자 두시야 되는데 그러니까 코라지 코로 사이에게 가서다 놈라 마서 론 지금 페트롤 쓰라 론 거매 파르주도 와 가서는 어디에 했잖아 건 아니 아니 미소마 숙체도 아니 거 지금 내 맞아도 요구 열봐 당번에 거 맞이 시스템에도 개요만 디qabla 아니 나 sabta 친구래 sabta 맞아 다 코로 싸운 것도 코로 싸는 할래 그래 셀레는데 아니 코로 게 김센도 삼로 마당 왔잖아 코로 매버 소얘기 코로 님이 삼로다 세베 페요 삼로다네 아니 코로 마슈초도 다지 와다들 대대 친구 와다지는 실제로 너무 가리게 봐 있네
So here describing verse number 35, habitual disturbing emotions are hard to stop and through counteractions and antidotes. So it's saying here that these are powerful afflictive emotions in our mindset. We are deeply habituated to them, and as beginners, it's hard for us to do anything to control them. And so it's saying here, what must be employed here is a certain awareness, and that he is pointing out particularly mindfulness and awareness here as the kind of like the first line of defense, really. So we say anger, for example, when anger arises, this is, it's kind of like talking about in full flow, where we're out to demonize the other. And they become 100% at fault and so on, because now it's anger speaking. But before the words that they said unsettled me, we would have to reach that point at which we become just that initial moment where we lose our peace of mind, and there's kind of a sense of there's something that in the chest where there's this feeling of discomfort that arises first. And so here, we need to be able to spot it at this point. This is where mindfulness, alertness come in, and to ask the question, and that before, it goes on further, because if we allow it to pass by this kind of gateway here where there's a chance of doing something about it, it already is kind of gone too far. And then we start to get this massive intelligence of anger coming up with all the so-called valid reasons why they are wrong and I am right, and why my anger is justified. And it's exactly like throwing petrol on a fire. It just bursts into more and more flame. And at that point, it's extremely difficult to do something about it. So it's imperative that we have this mindfulness and alertness at the gateway point where we feel the initial moment of our very initial response or reaction to these words that the other is saying, or the behavior of the other, and saying, oh, careful, anger is possible here. Anger may arise here. And we automatically, instead of following that line of anger, we click into the benefits of patience and the faults of anger. And this is now what we're contemplating. This is what we're putting into our mind. And therefore, we don't allow the mind to continue on beyond that. And so this is kind of saying here then, therefore, the guards of mindfulness and mental alertness destroy disturbing emotions like attachment or anger at once as soon as they arise. So this is where that point at which we should, really step into action.
我这他展现的心情呢，他刚才这鸟毛的这个他用过多是鸟毛讲我这个马的信息叫刚刚去把的个马的信息要的马的信息重要高了，我说个鸟毛讲就忙不上了当多多，马的信息重要个别中国要的，他刚才呢个鸟毛我那个这个广巴修全部要完人啥，鸟毛讲了他结果的。녀몽 배숙체 줘야 제금 등 가서 뺀 누가 요래 이네다 녀몽 숙촌다 땅에게 아니 제금 들어 모두 누가 요 말이야 이것도 빼고 요봐 이 빼긴다 전세기 처자 손전에 전세기 아니 천그 손에 아니 차서 녀몽 아니 당분에 아니 깨 맞주 맞잖아 거야 깨 맞주 맞잖아 보좀 지고서 보좀 좀 개설 할래 해서
So this is all like in the context of really knowing how mental afflictions can overtake our minds like this. Moving from that point of being unsettled initially, and then the mental afflictions itself, becomes an incredible analytical tool. The power of that side of analysis is incredible to come up with the reasons why my anger is justified, for example, and so. It feeds on how habituated we are to following this kind of analytical reasoning. And so, this analysis to kind of increase the anger, to sustain the anger, comes up with myriad reasons. Whereas if we are trying to subdue the anger, our analysis there is not nearly as astute or as powerful, that we find it very difficult to come up with valid reasons that we should, cool down and not speak through anger. And so here, it's kind of like the example is here of saying, the guards of mindfulness and alertness. These are the kind of like the how do you say the guards, those are the guardians of our peace of mind, really. Let's say these destroy disturbing emotions like attachment at once as soon as they arise. But we have to have those guards of mindfulness and alertness well trained.
도나 강도 졸람 진짜 장스 라지 심지 내가 진짜 시 준도 젬바 준도 젬다 시신 템바이 신도 좀 제설라니 이제
And verse number 36. In brief, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness and mental alertness, accomplish others' good. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다 간제 저 유준 다 되게 다 단다 권라 제샤 뭐 친데 와 되게 그가 더 추도 도와 이나 다 간제 셈 주답 제더와 셈 주답 제발에 다 시 자원이 다셈 주답 제더 셈 마두베 언제 라스게 샤원도 셈 녀모베 샤원도 주는 다바 마고 나가 잡게 지고요 아니 다지 아니 딜라테네 아니 동에 다 나서바지 노는 대대고 여봐 대대 인자 셈두들 다 돌아 다 졸람 간데지 지구 여나야 또또 내숨 졸람 간데지 요 있나야 얘는 란지 셈 내가 다 셈기 내다데 약고 워터바 제티 셈 내당 간데지 레샤다 다 sabza마저 녀모 계산에 계산 말이야 와다 네가 지금 셈디 차서 내다다 하고 맞지 내가 진짜시 임바데 아니 균도 대앞에 좀좀 딱에 좀좀 많은 균도 전 24 hours 7 균도 전에다 가서 균도 잡아도 시신 잡아 전에 아니 어떻게 전에 아니 랑기 룽아 예숨데 아니 지가서 현전 주변 쳐도 아니 배주 당도 같이 랑기 셈데 현전 주변 쳐도 배주 당도 아니 딜라데네 아니 룽아 예숨고 줘봐 되게 딱다 주고 와 딱다 주고 와 되는 계산 어떻게 쳐도 계산 안에 있어 다가데 제스에다 셈 주답 제들도 다 가도 나 셈 주답 제
And so this is a very skillful summary, really, as it says in brief, whatever you are doing. And so saying here how, how the main point of Dharma, when we talk about engage in Dharma practice, practice the Dharma, what it is referring to is the subduing of the mind, the controlling of the mind, of our internal world, that we are in control of what is going on there. And that is so important. And that means that, we have control over the mental afflictions, not the other way around. And so saying here that this is what it means when it talks about ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? And that is the question of, is my mind at peace now? Is it the beginning of a particular mental affliction or not? And to be able to, know your mind so well that you recognize the very point of emergence of mental affliction, so that then you can easily counteract it with an antidote. And so it's kind of like know your mind very, very well. Know your mind in order to control your mind. And this is what it's all about. And this means then that these mental factors of mindfulness and alertness, here they are again, with constant mindfulness and mental alertness. This is constant means here 24/7. And that we are employing the mindfulness and alertness to stand guard, to have this acute awareness of everything that occurs through body, speech, and mind. And that we are absolutely sure that all of these actions of body, speech, and mind are for the benefit of others, as it says here, accomplish others' good. And that's so. This is what it means. So the point of Dharma, engaging in Dharma practice, is to really control the mind, to render the mind solely, dedicated to others' good. So what it's really pointing out very starkly, a subdued mind is happiness. An unsubdued mind is suffering. It's really down to that. It's really like that, black and white.
yana khonru ke ngu duwe yana shedan ke ngu duwe ane shedan ke ane ke condition ke ngu do dosha ke condition ke ngu do khonru ke condition ke ngu do ta diga ga ngocho ne ane toktab chen ta toktab chen ane de dosha de shukchung de chen me ba khonru de shukchung de ta me ba shedan ta shetanla soba diga shuna an diga yongsa ga tsawa de karso na demo tenzing ge jigo yetu demo tenzing sigen ta jigo tsawa de demo tenzing ani demo tenzing ge nada karre sha ta demo tenzing ge nada te ta kaja 단지 말이 받쳐 단지 말이 ben내다 가르리샤 아니 단지 말이 ben내다 데 약보지 심바이나 엔디 니모 아니 가르리샤 다 다음에 또 쉐라 쉐라체 아니 단지 말이 받스긴데 오코 요리 요마르 오 요리 콜 로레 이네 코 로레데 그유 요마리 코 록셰 차데하데 내가 임바 인자 오다 디님부터 년부터 아니 거기면 소탑 도스는 다들 아니 됐다는 오다 아니 랑게 됐다는 오다 된자 디 내가 소에게 돈이 더 베셔라 깨고도 아니 디 시대에 아니 땡해진 거도 디 시대에 아니 추점 거도 오다 스타가데 되게 저도 아니 뭐 지금 지금 개쳐서 내가 차온 것도 아니 되게 저도 아니 뭐 거기 아니 저 람도 소아 람라 파체메 와 쇼그와
So, this process of really getting to become acutely aware of our mind and to know all the different machinations of our mind is actually key to really the entrance into the path in the first place. That, when we recognize our minds, we not only recognize the emergence of desire, attachment, anger, hatred, and so on, but we recognize the kind of conditions that can give rise to these negative emotions or mental afflictions. What is my mind prone to, in regards to these mental afflictions? What can trigger these mental afflictions in my mind? What conditions? And we can become extremely educated with regard to all of these conditions that facilitate mental affliction. And therefore, we can actually start to really strategize about how we avoid these conditions, and indeed also really aware when these mental afflictions really start to become first emerge in our mind, and to deal with them then very, very really skillfully, and to start to always have that goal to reduce the prevalence and the intensity of these mental afflictions with the goal to eradicate them completely. And so this then starts to bring in we start to question then what is the root cause of these mental afflictions, and it's an ignorance, and it's a specific ignorance of grasping at the true existence of a self-entity. And that then we say what could possibly be the antidote to such a kind of an integrated sort of negative ignorance, and that is the wisdom realizing selflessness. And so when we are aware of that, then we can start to understand how we can feed one into the mind in order to completely eradicate the other, because they're mutually exclusive mind states. That when we look at that ignorance, grasping at the true existence of a self-entity, that is a mind. That is a mind, that is a mentality, but it is mistaken with regard to its object. And that is our way in, because it's mistaken in regard to its object, it can be opposed, it can be uprooted. It's not based on valid reasoning, and that the wisdom that really uproots it is based on valid reasoning. And that wisdom, then we can understand how that itself needs to be cultivated based on a really strong concentration and meditation. And that indeed, in turn, is cultivated on the basis of a good ethical stance, good ethical framework. And of course, that brings us right back to controlling our mind, knowing what our mind is like, knowing our habituations, and that really in recognizing all of these things in order to control our mind. So this kind of saying how it's so integrated with the path that it is absolutely quintessential at all times anyway.
或者他得到准备准备，给我弄死，得到准备准备，给我弄，他也准备都那设计起了。那可说那把的呗，现在的讲中国话就是哪里影响
？And verse number 37, to remove the suffering of limitless beings, understand the purity of the three spheres, dedicate the virtue from making such effort to enlightenment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
我的，他得到准备准备，他真别准备准备，给我这个他也没准备多，对东安社会启动，可说那么大不大，就可说的这个可说的大的给那希望那些，这里给我准备说，这可说的，我说他，我可说的，作为讲究这个刚刚，可说那么大的写了给这个写了的什么的呢？讲究我的也是哪里讲，我的是我讲，对的我讲，
So this is, as we have pointed out just previously, to remove the suffering of limitless beings, understand the purity of the three spheres, and dedicate. So this is referring to that ultimate dedication where we understand that the virtue that we have accumulated, myself as the agent accumulating that virtue, and the objective for which I have accumulated that virtue, namely the state of enlightenment, are all lacking any objective existence and merely imputed by thought, and dedicating that virtue to enlightenment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
他东亚天尊南了送的，他东亚天尊南了送的，他这个的，他把那就送给街上呢，也是南街哪里，送就个说送就的，也是南了是，也是南了，弄的。And
then the dedication verses. For all who want to train on the Bodhisattva path, I have written the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, following what has been said by the excellent ones on the meaning of the sutras, tantras, and treatises.
是他感觉这个他的空给让说嘛也是个吧，说个说话的嘛也是，都就根据那个送给表达的，给我他们那边两次两年，第他带了怕不了，送给结束章的，是吧？送给结束章，结束个哪了？ 就早点的，大概在建设上了，我这个，都各个因素，我大概的，我这个讲，啊，这是，
So the 6Dec 10了，都说的。
这个大概空给的，可能给让说嘛，应把去，说个说话嘛，应把去，多大点就，多大二十，多大。 天君nam so sa to da to san ge so da天君nam so we de da de ki bu tam nam ge nyam so lang je ne so ma gui shi ge di je su zhang de su yu si de da su ba wa ga zhe de da bu de bian su ji ga so de ki bu tam ni ge nyam so lang to ba sa ma tu ruwa da wa de ge da ga je be ji dai de la ba ge de zhu de ne zhou ba de ge nyam so lang de to ba tu 我大感觉真这个，告诉他你不有根气，我大解释个，告诉他，真的说不定解释，咱们弄的真的关系或者了，
And so that particular verse there is really kind of really showing how this is an authentic sort of presentation, beholding to all that has gone before and verified in the proper way. So for all those who want to train on the Bodhisattva path, I have written the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, following what has been said by the excellent ones on the meaning of the sutras. In other words, these, first of all, it's the teachings of the Buddha himself, and then the tantras and treatises, the treatises from the holy beings who have ascertained the quintessential meanings of what the Buddha has said and have verified that through realization themselves. In other words, they have authenticated everything that has been said by the Buddhas, and this is the essence of all of that included here in the 37 practices. So it's kind of saying it's not for my own, it's not my own composition as such, but it is simply collated from all of these sources of the teachings, valid sources of the teachings.
当我这南就三这个区，这个是他必达不的，必达不一面的，达不多么个是基本什么三这个松，把到本地打三这个松的，对着他也把就把人家对着，但我不看没吧，那做把就把人家看到没吧，那做把就把人家三这个松了，张爱那做把就的，张爱那做把就对，他这里人把人家，张爱给对的本地打点了包。 是吧？入住的托麦拉说不给，张爱点了把人家这个专业不管，对的呢，那就把那个娘说了，那到把充电，到把车把充电去，我打点这个确实，那他确实比大不想要的，我送要，我打的送要的，我这里。
So what it really kind of the way it is usually presented is that it's talking about the incredible quality of the Buddhist teachings to begin with as the kind of foundations of all that we understand to be the Buddhist teachings, and that then how they are taken up by valid holy beings from the past, and saying how with the way because of the many varied dispositions of disciples that the Buddha met along the way, these teachings also incredibly varied, and that the interpretative and the divinative and so on. And so these were then initially collated by the great charioteers like Nagarjuna and Asanga, who brought all these teachings together, ordered them, and so on. Then these teachings were assimilated by the great yogis who went into retreat and meditation and realized or developed the realizations based on those teachings, thereby verifying them. And so this is what this author is calling on, saying this is a valid lineage that is not only valid because they're teachings of the Buddha, but they are teachings that have been verified in this way. They have reached being relied upon to gain the realizations of the true import of those teachings. So it's showing how this is of absolutely best quality teaching. And the next verse, though not poetically pleasing to scholars, owing to my poor intelligence and lack of learning, I relied on the sutras and the words of the excellent. So I think these bodhisattva practices are without error. So then again, this is a very traditional expression of humility by holy beings like this, Gyaltse Tokme, who has authored this particular text. And so it's kind of like very much in contrast, kind of saying, to 21st century authors who always claim, the plaudits of whatever they have authored themselves. Here, the author is going out of his way to point out how inept he is in a way. My poor intelligence, lack of learning. And so therefore, he has relied on the sutras and the words of the excellent. and that is saying, and because of that, I really think these practices are without error. So it's a beautiful kind of graceful humility that is expressed by holy beings like this.
가서나 그나 들이가서 내가 제가 저거는 나시다 신기배 나시다 약고 매라면 내가 나기 말마 그 약고 시고 나 약고 때문에
So probably not good for a modern interview, kind of saying when you kind of go into it and you kind of think, oh, maybe I can't do this work, I'm not capable of doing this work, an expression of your humility, instead of having to say, oh yes, I will and I can surpass everything is needed of me, and so on. Yeah.
다 유엔장서 계세 죄라 랍 가서 유엔장서 다 이나장서 계세 죄바 랍전남 로면 다제 띵바 가외치 계알다 가서 계알다 마제 라소 네베소 담반나제 소바제스스.
So next verse. However, as the great deeds of bodhisattvas are hard to fathom for one of my poor intelligence, I beg the Excellent to forgive all faults, such as contradictions and non sequiturs. And so again, this expression of humility, and we're saying like, for one of my poor intelligence here, this explanation may fall short, and that I take responsibility for all faults, such as contradictions or over elaboration or using unnecessary words and so on.
그래 다들 가서는 콩에다 내가 요무 가서 다른 예 제세 자외가 텐데 노티시해요. 그러와 가서 그 치먹어야 될 라요데 아니 저와 매겐데 텐데 라요 다들 지금 가서 경기 차중화이나 아니 다 그러와 가서 다니 전부 나로 수수수에 어디서
And so I'm offering my apology as well for my explanation here, where I have over elaborated, used unnecessary words, or perhaps haven't given a full explanation where it was needed, and so on.
And telejoy as a gear to walk with Kuto Chajus, Sam Georges, Sita Shire Tale, Minever, Jeresigo, Dedo Tuma Shows.
And then the final verse, through the virtue from this, may all living beings gain the ultimate and conventional altruistic intention, and thereby become like the protector Chenrezig, who dwells in neither extreme, nor in the world, nor in peace.
Or the telejoy Donda Janju, Sunda Kuzo Janju Silvia, showing Sita Shire Talera, that's Siva Koa, Shiva, and a Taba. And the Genesis command to the shows were.
And so here, referring to the ultimate and conventional mind of enlightenment, altruistic intention, and becoming like Chenrezig says, not in the world, that means not in psychic existence, or in peace, the extreme of nirvana. So this is the becoming like protector Chenrezig.
Okay. 다들은 뭐도 디차버려 봐. 디차버려. 계속만 제가 다다디 뭐도 뉴이어 다 디창도 빨라지 잠도 샤샤나. 진짜 노르켈라레 답대 유그데. 그러와 진짜 지금 아니야 샤바 쪽에 안 걸어서 남이다. 디발이야 파티 다오들 요시그와. 크리스마스.
Again, saying that since we've come to the end of the text here now, that we'll take a break until sometime in the new year. To give you a chance to celebrate the season and maybe go to parties, kind of saying, and catch up with members of the family and so on as well.
Yeah, 같이 되는 멤버는 소소야 단대도 것도 대 치셔도 되게 것도 냠내 제도네 소소 샤나 소소 컴베 나로야 냠내 제도네 크리스마스 뉴이어 갈도 제도나 안 걸로 사바네 안 것도 좀 가르 치고서네 딱이야 사바 직전에 너라 뒤주 여바이나 즉 전주 소리 전화 전주 전화 가서 전주 전화 가서 봐 어떤데 직접 전화 그 저거 차가 말이다 갈리 잼 거는 마치 순조나 그 야부 여러 삼사 좀 말이야.
Yeah, yeah. So, and Ken was saying, yes, of course, even better if you choose to take this time over Christmas and New Year to actually meditate on the import of this particular text and do some meditation and do some practice. That would be even better. That would be excellent to do that. And then at some point in the new year, we'll start up again and just thinking about what text to take up. I was thinking myself of the Bodhisattva's way of life, the Shantideva, the wonderful Shantideva text. So that would be wonderful. We will be able to just enter into that text nice and slowly, really savoring it as we go along.
Yeah, what is it? And I don't know to time what we went to some as well.
So let's do our dissolution and so on.
Dan ang jiwala ta ka je the what ta 年中的 samlo che ta 年中的 sem den de ti ko la ye ba jo 年中的 sem ti lo ti 年中ye ba lo ta ga ra an na ge jiwala ne pe ma ta ma che ba ji jo so sa sa che an de ne ta ka je an den de ge an sem je ta je ge to san je ko ba tu ne se so su de ga de ka ba to ga de lu de re tu ya na sem de re tu de le sha ba ji tu ge ba che ba shap se che chen an tendege mani batagara kala isem kangi tendota mani batagara kala sen ma sha an tendege loti an nime ki kwaji ju so samsa cha ta tende otene samta tene ta semje tamje ge do sanje ko ba ni toba ma je na ta ma ni to toba chi samta ge samsta de janju ge semji ro samta an tende samlo stand de ane tende gasa tende gasa simje da sanje ko ba tubi inso tende timba loti ane tawe ki waje juso samsa tende pande tsawe la ma no tagi jo ba kana kuso to mu tsa tende sunde cha tabe ka so te ni ba ka so shu sumbe ka te sanje ko ma to je so tende ko ba she shwa.
So let's do the completion of our practice and dissolution and so on. So again, we concentrate on the figure of Chenrezig in the space in front, and then reflect on renunciation as we begin to establish the lotus, sun, and moon discs mandala seat on our crown in preparation for the invocation verse. And so here we reflect on the fact of cyclic existence being the nature of suffering, and that this point of a really definite emergence from there, that mind of renunciation produces the lotus mandala seat. And then referring to the self who is engaged in this practice of renunciation, this I, where is it to be found? Looking into the body and the mind, and reaching kind of the end of the analysis there to that merely not finding what I was analyzing for, the mere negation of the object of negation, and from that very mind then arises the sun disc mandala seat. And then reflecting on the purpose of all of this to attain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, reflecting just on that aspiration to lead all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment, comes that the moon disc mandala seat representing the mind of enlightenment itself. And then, so having established that seat on our crown, we utter the invocation verse 3 times. So, glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. And at the end of the first recitation, the figure comes towards our crown. At the end of the second, arrives on our crown. And at the end of the third, we feel that they will remain steadfast there until we attain the state of enlightenment.
뭐 들었죠. 아니 들었 야라도 뭐 맨데다 저 퓨처를 다 거서 찾아와서 최시자와 제소라고 해서 겨저서 당에서 탐대당에 자주 친구고 사실 표시 주시 매도도 들을리지니데 저마다 산제식도 믿음 저웬남 다시라 쇼벌 쇼 이당고로는 맨들 니야 다야 미소다 야라도 뭐 맨데다 저와 퓨 어다데 대다 투기를 대화 좀 대회 동반에 저도 무슨 이식계 소설들을 공부하시 아니 내가 랑이 닝데 빼마다 대치 나주 되게 내시전我的你们年终恐怕现在你不要嘛大家起来就说说恐怕现在呢，现在咱个真的，他说这，咱这的，跟这个身边到三千恐怕就俺这个再觉得嘛，你们当然身边比那个。现在他感觉的，你们经过这个就说说，但甚至他是三千恐怕你们马到他们这个在那上面到 NT。다윗이 뭐지를 조소 선자제 때문에 반대서 라마를 다윗 인가 되면 그래 구조도 못서 될 소리자 담배 가서 배 집에 가서 꿈에 가서 땐스가 산재 고마마도 그것도 제수 소고 소소 고마치.
So then we make the offering of the seven limbs practice, and including, the practice of the offering of purification of negativities, of rejoicing, requesting not to enter into parinirvana, but to stay and teach, and and the dedication, of course, as well as the offering of the mandala at this point, and then through the offerings here, we perceive that the meditational deity Chenrezig on our crown experiences a bliss conjoining with voidness, and they abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. And thereafter, we go through the same process of preparing the lotus, sun, and moon disk mandala seat at our heart. And from that same contemplations on the renunciation, producing the lotus mandala seat, and this searching for the I or the self through body and mind, reaching that point of the mere negation of the object of negation, producing the sun disk mandala seat, and that sense of the goal of attaining enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, that the mind of enlightenment itself producing the moon disk mandala seat. And again, then we issue the invocation verse thrice. O glorious and precious root Guru, come take a lotus and moon seed placed there at my heart. They keep me safe in your kindness, bestowing me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first, the Buddha on our crown begins the journey down through our central channel. At the end of the second, arrives at the pre-prepared seat at our heart. And at the end of the third, we have this assurance that they will remain steadfast there until we attain the state of enlightenment. And this brings a sense of real joy to our minds.
제레스가 생각 오마니 빼면 되게 가서 인도디 과 되게 제 아니 되네 양 되네스를 가서도 엄다리 두다리 돌서 엄다리 돌서 엄다리 두다리 돌서 잠이야가 생각도 과 되게 제 되네 이 가서도 되네가 오마 예다마 예도 좀 따다가도 마셔만에서 되네 이거 되네가 다숨과 되게 제 되네다 라기 닝그서 라마 제레스 구송도는 외세트네 지번에 간디가 바로 다 류나 탐제 외세트네 아니 랑게 토마 메바는 사도 류이거나 소주바 마지막에 미사와 줘봐 나서봐 다가니 주인 참아 지도가 제나서 무슨 로다라 소바 세딜라 사와 생가마 이ingama 토마 메바는 사도 디바데 디바 다가니 제 자주스템에게 아니 가서 랍자다 가와 자도 접전이 이제 시도 다가니 이제 상하게 안 도박해내네 아니 자도 주시나 소바 된데게 아니 가서 상하게 담지다 개와 세딜라 생가마 이ingama 토마 메바는 사도 다 또나 제가 하나 뭐다 라생 하나 보 내가 컨대지여 봐 있대 내가 컨대지 싸여 봐 있네 장진 딱과 중수 선사체 오늘 고마셔
So then the the petals enfold the seated figure at our heart and are sealed at the tip by a five-pronged white vajra, then encircled by the mantra of compassion in a clockwise direction, the mantra of wisdom and drishti mantra in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination in a clockwise direction. Then from within, light rays begin to permeate the lotus petals into every cell of our body, from the crown of our heads to the soles of our feet. And in doing so, they begin the process of completely purifying every possible negativity or fault that we have accrued since beginning this time, all those associated with the physical negativities of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, all those associated with verbal faults of lying, stealing, harsh speech, lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and an idle gossip. And then the mental negativities of malicious intent, covetousness, and wrong view, and all also associated with this life, the life previous to this, the life previous to that, going right back to beginningless time. That we also take into account all of the vows that we have contravened, that we have ever taken, be it the Patimoksha, the Bodhisattva, or the Tantric vows, or pledges that we have with our guru that have been tainted, that have been broken, and so on. And all of the naturally occurring faults and all that has been proscribed by the Buddha, wherever we have contravened, that all of these faults, all of these negativities are completely and utterly purified.
그 장치 따고 중수 오다 딜라 때네 그 장치 따고 중네 중수 오다 야부 시우 주서 근데 내가 사와 딜라 때네 다 소소라 지금 단단 하대 봐게 아니 지금 가서다 루게 나사 생그 동네 아니 로아 다 가자 지금 가서데 아니 최주바 다 계게 가서데 다 가져 제 나초바 주연 봐 나초바 치다 나초바 주원로 다 네가 그거 시와 중수 삼사 안 다가는 지금 자롱 킬레 교연 되게 마찬가지 되게 그가 아니 레스와 야고쇼 차소 아니 하도도 뉴도 산제 고마 토와라 타메게 나시의 교연이 맞자 타메 나시의 교연 다니 가나타자 다바람사 바시 차도와 야고쇼 소소 서로 고마시 아니 되나 소소 신도 저 롱디 랭체 라마체르스 굿 현지 지금 저 소소의 류드 라마체르스 쿨로 교수 선사죠 소소 신도 저 선데 랭체 라마체르스가 투도 현지 지금 저 소소 센터 라마체르스가 쿨로 교수 선사 랑기 루가 유선다 라마체르스가 루가 유선 원예매 교수 타야고 신도 선 어디서 아니 되나 랑기 내게 내게 교환하자 되나 라마체르스가 시작할 교수 선사 고마시
And also that any newly acquired faults that we have, any kind of illness or disease that we have in the body, all of this that is kind of inconducive to perfect practice of the Dharma, and any problems that we have in the physical sense, and then we in our channels of winds and drops and so on in the elements, that all of the channels, winds and drops are rendered useful for us in our practice. They're ready for us to engage in perfect practice, and that especially this attitude of ordinary appearance with which we perceive the world, and it becomes a major fault in our being able to complete the path. That this is completely done away with. We're finished with this, and we see everything in its pure appearance. And we can see how then every aspect of body, speech, and mind, and all of our faults and anything inconducive to our being able to perfect our practice is completely gone now. It's completely eradicated now, and therefore, and through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed automatically into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, with the mind of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of Buddha. And so I now, become a fully enlightened being, and all my body, speech, and mind becomes indivisible from the body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. Again, I see how wonderful this is. I rejoice at this. Likewise, the place in which I am residing is completely cleared of all fault and becomes a completely pure realm of an enlightened being.
다랑 라마체레스 꿀주에 투가레 왜세 빠도 매버 촌에 심제가 장도 뭐 왜세 좋아하는 왜세 대다 단자자 아니 가서 탐속에 심제 대다 탐제라 아니 왜세 디가 돼 아니 다 포라 때네 심제리는 왜세 딜 아니 포라 때네 대다 단자자 라마체레스 구수 또 워예매 차수 참 네 대다 단자 네 교원 탐제 때네 라마체레스가 시작할 주수 섬자자 다 라마 보다 심제 탐제거든도 산제 고마 처음에 심제 단자 산제 칼 고마를 꼬여도마 지금서 다 니마 데는 좀 손을 가와고 보다 야고 쉬고 줘서 삼백 된 줘서 다 야고 쉬고 줘서 손을 가와고 데네서 다 심제 단자 산제가 살아 꼬여 제가서 고마 꼬여 대치도 소도 자와 주에 그 두개 소소的 제가 그 유대는 두사 주와 매마 아니 또왜 팔다 잠에 서서 어디도 고마시 So
then, seeing myself as that fully enlightened being, I send out light rays from my own heart center to cover all the beings and all the three realms of existence, and on dissolving into their crowns, they immediately are purified of all fault, and they spontaneously arise as fully enlightened beings, indivisible in body, speech, and mind from the enlightened body of Chenrezig. And that the place that they are in is purified of all faults and becomes the palatial abode of an enlightened being. And so that this then is something that I realize, that this objective I have of attaining enlightenment and then bringing all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment is accomplished today. How magnificent that is. That's something really, really wonderful. And I realize at the same time that, this state of enlightenment, that myself as the agent bringing this about, the virtue that has accumulated to make this possible, is all empty of any objective existence and is merely imputed by thought. And this then leads to that sense of bliss, which combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. And so I know that this is happening at the level of imagination now, but I make a sincere dedication that it will quickly be truly manifest for real.
그래서 랑이 줄라다 간제 지 rumum도 받잖아다 년주고 서다 자주서 돈이 좀 싫어 뉴도 깨도 하도 다 간제 돈이 니부지글 돈이 니부지 람줄에 깨도 받다 근데 이마다 랑이 다 남주시 되는시 그 랑이 깽 내가 근데 상보이나 녀바이나 가야 쳐봐요 뭐 되게가 돈이 니부지글 람줄에 깨도 줄을 좋아서 이 통계를 좋아서 what did you that did twingle you to did twingle that bet you down to what you show so what did it watch it what did it
and so to and understanding me the sequence of events that must occur to make this manifest is that of course I must attain that state of enlightenment myself in order to lead all others to that state of enlightenment. And that in order for myself to attain that state of enlightenment, I must develop absolute genuine renunciation mind of enlightenment and the correct view of emptiness, and ultimately correct realization of emptiness. And so, and that means I must generate these particular realizations on my own mind stream. And in order to do that, I need to be able to transform every situation, whether it's a positive or negative, into a cause that will lead to that state of enlightenment. And so, therefore, I pray that may I be able to see all that arises as cooperative, or sorry, as conducive conditions for me to establish these causes to bring that state of enlightenment about. And may I really work towards using every opportunity that arises for this purpose.